The sound of hoofbeats echoed in the darkness as Willa Hartwell fled through the moonlit Colorado plains, her heart hammering against her ribs like a wild mustang. Behind her, the shouts of Jed Blackwood, the man who had stolen her family's wagon and everything in it, grew fainter as she pushed her mare harder, praying the exhausted animal could maintain its desperate pace just a little longer. It was 1875, and Willa had never imagined her journey west would end like this, alone on the frontier at midnight, her family's possessions stolen, with nothing but the clothes on her back and the horse beneath her. The wagon train she had been traveling with was 2 days behind, her foolish decision to scout ahead with Blackwood, a man she mistakenly trusted, now seeming like the worst mistake of her 22 years. "Come on, Penny," she whispered to her faltering horse, leaning low over its sweat-slicked neck. "Just a little further, girl." The mare's labored breathing concerned her. They'd been riding hard for over an hour, and Willa knew the animal couldn't continue much longer. The distant ridge of mountains to the west offered hope of shelter, but they were still miles away across open country. Blackwood knew these lands far better than she did. When Penny stumbled for the third time, Willa knew she had to make a decision. Pushing the exhausted animal any further might kill her only means of escape. With reluctance, she guided the horse toward a small cluster of cottonwoods beside a shallow creek bed that cut across the prairie. "Rest now," she murmured, sliding from the saddle and leading Penny to water. The night air had grown chill, and Willa shivered in her thin calico dress. She had nothing, no food, no blanket, not even a weapon to defend herself. The small knife she kept in her boot was her only protection. Willa sank down against the trunk of a tree, trying to quiet her breathing as she strained to hear any sounds of pursuit. The vastness of the frontier stretched around her, beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Stars scattered across the night sky like spilled diamonds, offering the only light besides the half-moon hanging low on the horizon. The minutes stretched into an hour as she waited, alert for any sign of Blackwood. Just as she began to hope she might have truly escaped him, the distant sound of a horse approaching from the east caused her blood to freeze. Blackwood had found her trail. Penny, sensing her tension, nickered softly. Willa quickly grabbed the reins, desperately trying to quiet the tired animal. There was nowhere to run, the prairie offered no hiding places, and Penny couldn't outrun a fresh horse. But the approaching rider wasn't following the creek as she'd expected. Instead, the steady rhythm of hoofbeats seemed to be coming from a different direction, crossing her path rather than following it. A stranger then, but whether friend or foe, she couldn't know. Willa crouched lower, pulling Penny deeper into the shadows of the cottonwoods. Her hand closed around the handle of her small knife, a poor defense but better than nothing. The rider came into view, silhouetted against the starlit prairie, a tall figure on an equally impressive horse. He rode with the easy confidence of someone who belonged in this wild country, his broad-brimmed hat shadowing his features. As he approached the creek bed, his horse suddenly lifted its head, catching Penny's scent. The man pulled up, scanning the darkness with a wariness that spoke of years spent in dangerous territory. "Hello, the trees," he called out, his voice low but carrying clearly in the night air. "I know you're there. I mean no harm." Willa remained silent, heart pounding. The stranger dismounted with fluid grace, keeping one hand on his horse's reins. "I can see your horse," he said. "And if I can, so can anyone else following you. You'd be better off showing yourself." His logic was sound, but Willa had already trusted one stranger today, with disastrous results. "I have a gun," she lied, her voice steadier than she felt. The man chuckled, a warm sound that somehow didn't seem threatening. "No, madam, I don't believe you do. But I respect your caution." He took off his hat, revealing a face that caught the moonlight's strong features, a straight nose, and eyes that seemed to hold their own light. "Name's Reed Calloway. I'm just passing through, heading to my ranch near Silver Creek." "Silver Creek is 2 days' ride from here," Willa said, instantly regretting revealing that she knew the area. "That it is," he agreed. "I've been to Denver for supplies." He gestured to his laden pack horse that stood patiently behind his mount. Now, I don't make a habit of prying, but it's unusual to find a lady alone out here at midnight. Especially one who seems to be hiding. Willa hesitated, weighing her options. This Reed Calloway seemed decent enough, but Blackwood had seemed trustworthy too, until he wasn't. I'm not alone by choice, she finally said. I'm being pursued. Reed's posture changed subtly, becoming more alert. By whom? A thief. He stole my family's wagon while I was watering the horses. I managed to get away on Penny, but... She trailed off, realizing how vulnerable she was revealing herself to be. Reed nodded thoughtfully. Which direction did he come from? And how long ago? From the east. Maybe an hour since I lost him, but he knows these lands. She stepped forward slightly, still keeping a safe distance. My name is Willa Hartwell. I was traveling with the Morrison wagon train to Oregon. Recognition flashed in his eyes. I passed them 3 days back. They're still a good 40 miles east of here. He looked at her tired horse. Your mare won't make it back to them without rest. I know. The admission cost her, acknowledging her desperate situation. Reed seemed to consider something, looking west toward the distant mountains. My camp is about 2 miles from here. It's well hidden in a small canyon. You'd be safe there tonight, and I can help you rejoin your wagon train tomorrow. Willa tightened her grip on her knife. Why would you help me? You don't know me. His expression remained calm, but something flashed in his eyes, perhaps indignation that she would question his honor, or maybe understanding of her suspicion. Miss Hartwell, out here, people help each other or they don't survive long. I've been riding these trails for 12 years, and I've never left any one man or woman stranded when I could offer assistance. He paused. But the choice is yours. I won't force my company on you. Before Willa could respond, the distant sound of a horse's whinny carried on the night air coming from the east. Reed's head snapped in that direction, his hand moving instinctively to the revolver at his hip. That's him, Willa whispered, fear clutching at her throat. Reed made a quick decision. Get on your horse. Follow me, stay close, and keep quiet. He swung back into his saddle with practiced ease. I know a way to lose him. With no better options, Willa mounted Penny, who protested weakly at being asked to move again. Reed led the way, not along the creek as she expected, but straight across it and into the open prairie. He kept their pace moderate, mindful of her exhausted horse. We're leaving tracks? Willa pointed out anxiously. Not for long, Reed replied, guiding them toward a stretch of rocky ground that rose gradually toward the foothills. Once we hit the shale, we'll be invisible. True to his word, within 15 minutes they were crossing a wide expanse of flat rock where their horses' hooves left no mark. Reed led them in a winding path, occasionally doubling back, until even Willa had lost all sense of their direction. Only when he seemed satisfied they had successfully broken their trail did he turn west again, leading her into increasingly rugged country. The small canyon he had mentioned appeared suddenly a narrow cleft in the rocky landscape that Willa would have ridden past without noticing. Reed dismounted at the entrance, leading his horse in on foot and gesturing for her to do the same. Watch your step, he cautioned. The path is treacherous in the dark. The canyon widened after its narrow mouth, revealing a secluded space perhaps 100 feet across. At its center, the remains of a small fire glowed faintly. Reed's camp was minimal but well organized, a bedroll, saddlebags, and cooking gear arranged neatly beside the fire. It's not much, he said, helping her with Penny, but it's defensible. Only one way in or out, and the walls are too steep to climb. Willa found herself relaxing slightly for the first time in hours. Thank you, Mr. Calloway. Reed, he corrected, immediately busying himself with the horses. He removed Penny's saddle, examining the mare with a practiced eye. She's a good horse. Strong-willed, like her owner, I'd wager. He smiled briefly. She needs water and rest, but she'll be fine. While Reed tended to the animals, Willa sank down by the fire, the events of the day catching up with her in a rush of exhaustion. She watched him work, noting the efficient way he moved and the gentle manner he had with the horses. When he'd finished, he added wood to the fire, careful to keep it small enough that the light wouldn't be visible beyond the canyon walls. "Are you hungry?" he asked, opening one of his saddlebags. Willa suddenly realized she hadn't eaten since morning. "Yes, thank you." Reed produced jerky, dried apples, and a half loaf of bread trail rations, but to Willa, they seemed like a feast. As they ate, she found herself telling him the full story of how she'd come to be fleeing across the Colorado prairie at midnight. She had been traveling with the Morrison wagon train since St. Louis, her destination being her uncle's farm near Portland. Jed Blackwood had joined their company in Kansas, claiming to be a guide familiar with the Western Territories. He'd seemed knowledgeable and trustworthy, offering to show Willa a shortcut to a trading post where she could mail a letter to her uncle. They'd taken her family's wagon, as it was lighter than most, with plans to rejoin the train by nightfall. "When we reached the trading post, he suggested we camp there for the night," Willa explained. "Said the wagon train would catch up by morning since they were taking a longer route." I believed him. She shook her head at her own naivety. "While I was tending to the horses, he ransacked our wagon. Took everything of value, including my father's pocket watch and my mother's locket. Those are the things that hurt most to lose," Reed observed quietly. Willa nodded. "When I confronted him, She hesitated. "He made it clear I wouldn't be rejoining the wagon train. That's when I ran for Penny and got away." Reed's expression had hardened as she spoke. "This Blackwood, would you recognize him again?" "Yes. He has a scar across his right cheek, and he's missing the top of his little finger on his left hand." She frowned. "Why do you ask?" "Because there's a man who matches that description who's been causing trouble around these parts for months. Theft primarily, but there are rumors of worse." He stared into the fire. "The law's been looking for him." Willa shivered, realizing how much danger she had truly been in. "Do you think he'll keep looking for me?" "Possibly, but not because of you," Reed said. "He'll want your horse. A good mare like Penny is valuable out here." They fell silent for a while, the crackling of the fire the only sound besides the occasional stamping of the horses. Willa found herself studying her rescuer more closely. Reed Calloway appeared to be in his early 30s, his face weathered by sun and wind, but handsome in a rugged way. His eyes, which she could now see were a deep blue in the firelight, held a quiet intelligence. "You said you have a ranch?" she asked, curious about the man who had come to her aid. Reed nodded. "Silver Creek Ranch. It's modest, about 400 acres, with a small herd of cattle and some of the finest horses this side of the Mississippi, if you'll pardon my pride in them. You're a long way from home for a supply run." A shadow passed over his features. "Denver has certain supplies I can't get closer to home. Medicines primarily." Something in his tone discouraged further questions on that subject, so Willa changed direction. "How long have you been ranching in Colorado?" "About 5 years now. Before that, I drove cattle up from Texas, rode with the Pony Express for a spell, even tried my hand at mining when the silver fever hit." His smile returned. "None of it suited me like ranching does." "And your family?" The question slipped out before Willa considered that it might be too personal. "Don't have much of one," Reed replied simply. "My parents died when I was young. Raised by an uncle who wasn't particularly interested in raising anyone. Struck out on my own at 16. He shrugged. "The usual story out here." "I'm sorry," Willa said softly. "Don't be. I've made my own way, and I'm content with it." He glanced at her. "What about you? Is there family waiting besides your uncle in Oregon?" Willa shook her head. "No. My parents died of fever last winter. My uncle is my mother's brother, he's the only family I have left." Reed nodded, understanding in his eyes. They shared the companionable silence of two people who recognized something familiar in each other's solitude. Eventually, Reed rose and retrieved a blanket from his pack. "You should get some rest." We'll need to leave at first light if we're going to intercept your wagon train. Willa accepted the blanket gratefully. What about you? I'll keep watch for a while. He checked his revolver before returning it to its holster. Just a precaution. This canyon is well hidden, but I don't like taking chances. As Willa settled onto the ground near the fire, wrapping the blanket around her shoulders, Reed positioned himself at the canyon entrance, a silhouette against the night sky. She should have been too anxious to sleep, too aware of the dangers that had chased her into this remote canyon with a man she barely knew. Yet somehow, she felt safer than she had in weeks. Perhaps it was exhaustion, or perhaps it was something about Reed Calloway himself, a steadiness that inspired trust despite her recent experience. Her last thought before drifting off was that she hoped her judgment wasn't failing her a second time. Willa woke to the soft, golden light of dawn filtering into the canyon. For a moment, she was disoriented, until the events of the previous night came rushing back. She sat up quickly, looking around for Reed. He was already awake, tending a small fire where coffee was brewing in a battered tin pot. Penny and the other horses were saddled and ready for travel. Good morning, Reed said, noting her alertness. Coffee? Willa accepted the tin cup he offered, warming her hands around it. Did you sleep at all? Enough. He gestured toward the canyon entrance. I scouted the area at first light. No sign of Blackwood, but that doesn't mean he's given up. We should move quickly. As they shared a simple breakfast of the remaining bread and dried fruit, Reed explained his plan. The Morrison wagon train would be following the main trail west, which ran roughly parallel to their position about 15 miles south. If they rode hard, they could intercept the wagons by midday. Penny's rested enough for the journey? Willa asked, concerned for her horse. She's stronger than she looks, Reed said with approval. Like you? The compliment brought a flush to Willa's cheeks that she attributed to the hot coffee. They packed quickly, erasing all signs of their camp with the efficiency of experienced travelers. As they rode out of the canyon into the brightening day, Willa couldn't help but feel a strange mixture of relief and regret. Relief that she would soon rejoin the wagon train and continue her journey to Oregon. Regret that she would be parting ways with Reed Calloway, who had shown her nothing but kindness and respect. They rode south across rolling prairie land that gradually gave way to more wooded terrain. Reed kept them moving at a steady pace, occasionally stopping to survey their back trail, alert for any sign of pursuit. He was a natural horseman, sitting his tall buckskin gelding with an ease that spoke of thousands of miles in the saddle. Have you always been good with horses? Willa asked during one such pause. Reed's expression softened. My mother taught me to ride before I could walk properly, or so my uncle claimed. Don't remember much about her, but I remember the feel of sitting in front of her on her mare. He patted his gelding's neck. Buck here is descended from that same line of horses. My uncle kept them after my parents died, probably the only sentimental thing he ever did. What happened to your parents? Willa ventured. Comanche raid, Reed said without emotion. 1848. Our homestead was on the Texas frontier. My uncle was in town that day, came back to find the place burned and me hiding in the root cellar where my mother had put me. I'm so sorry, Willa said, thinking of her own parents and their slow decline from fever painful, but at least she had been able to say goodbye. Reed shrugged. It was a long time ago. Life goes on. He nudged Buck forward, clearly uncomfortable with the personal turn of the conversation. They rode in silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. Around mid-morning, they crested a rise and Reed pulled up sharply, raising a hand for Willa to do the same. Below them, perhaps a half-mile distant, a lone rider was crossing their path, heading east. Blackwood, Reed said grimly, his hand moving to his revolver. Willa felt her heart rate quicken. Are you sure? The build is right, and that's your wagon horse he's riding. Reed studied the distant figure. He's not looking for you anymore, he's heading back east. Probably thinks you've already rejoined your wagon train, or maybe he's decided a single horse isn't worth the trouble. What do we do? Willa asked, her voice tight. Reed considered for a long moment. Much as I'd like to confront him, getting you safely back to your people takes priority. We'll keep our distance and continue south. With luck, he won't spot us. They waited until Blackwood had disappeared over the eastern horizon before continuing, keeping to low ground and wooded areas where possible. By noon, they reached a wide creek that Reed identified as a landmark. The wagon trail crosses this creek about 3 miles west of here, he explained. Your people should be passing through sometime this afternoon, assuming they've kept to their expected pace. They followed the creek westward, the day growing warmer as the sun climbed higher. When they stopped to water the horses, Willa found herself studying Reed's profile as he scanned the horizon. There was something compelling about his quiet competence, the way he moved through this wild country with such ease. "Why did you stop to help me last night?" she asked suddenly. "Most men would have ridden on by." Reed turned to look at her, surprise flickering across his features. "Most men aren't raised to believe that helping others is what separates us from animals." He smiled slightly. "Besides, I could see you were in trouble, and I've been in trouble myself enough times to know the value of a helping hand." "Well, I'm grateful," Willa said. "Without you, I might not have escaped Blackwood. I certainly wouldn't have found my way back to the wagon train so quickly." Reed accepted her thanks with a nod, but seemed embarrassed by her gratitude. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Willa said firmly. "They wouldn't have." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, a moment of connection that transcended their brief acquaintance. Reed was the first to look away, clearing his throat. "We should keep moving," he said, mounting Buck again. "Don't want to miss your wagon train." They reached the crossing point by early afternoon and found clear signs that the wagons had passed through recently wheel ruts in the soft earth near the creek, the remains of a noon camp fire, and tracks of many horses and oxen. "They're making good time," Reed observed, examining the trail. "Probably no more than 2 hours ahead of us." They followed the wagon tracks westward, pushing their horses to a faster pace now that their goal was in sight. The landscape opened up into broad, grassy plains broken by scattered copses of trees and the occasional rocky outcropping. In the distance, the peaks of the Rocky Mountains stood as silent sentinels against the blue sky. It was Reed who spotted the wagon train first, a line of white canvas covers stretching across the prairie like sails on a distant sea. He pointed them out to Willa, whose face lit up with relief. "We did it!" she exclaimed. Reed smiled at her enthusiasm. "Told you we'd find them." As they rode closer, Willa could make out individual wagons and the figures of people walking alongside them or riding on horseback. A rider at the rear of the train spotted them approaching and turned back, presumably to alert the others. By the time they reached the wagons, a small group had gathered to meet them, faces curious and somewhat suspicious. "Willa Hartwell!" A stout woman in her 50s pushed through the group, her face a mixture of relief and anger. "Where on earth have you been? We've been worried sick." "Mrs. Morrison," Willa said, dismounting quickly. "I'm so sorry for the concern I caused." "There was trouble, Blackwood," a man's voice interrupted. Thomas Morrison, the wagon master, stepped forward, his weathered face grim. "We figured as much when neither of you returned. Found his bedroll and gear gone this morning. He stole our wagon," Willa explained. "Everything in it. I only escaped with Penny." A murmur ran through the gathered settlers. Mrs. Morrison put a protective arm around Willa's shoulders. "Lord have mercy, girl. You could have been killed out there alone." "She wasn't alone for long," Reed said, dismounting and removing his hat respectfully. "Reed Calloway, madam. I found Miss Hartwell last night and offered assistance." Morrison studied Reed with the careful assessment of a man accustomed to judging character quickly. "Calloway. You run that horse ranch near Silver Creek, don't you?" Reed nodded. "Yes, sir. We met briefly when your train passed through last week." Recognition dawned on Morrison's face. "That's right. You sold medicines to Doc Taylor." He extended his hand. "We're in your debt, mister." Calloway, for bringing our lost lamb back to the fold." Reed shook the offered hand. "Just doing what anyone would do." "Not anyone," Willa said quietly, echoing her words from earlier. The wagon train had stopped for the encounter, but Morrison was clearly anxious to get moving again. "We need to make another 5 miles before sundown," he announced. "Willa, you can ride in the Peterson wagon for now. We'll sort out your situation once we make camp." Willa turned to Reed, suddenly realizing this was goodbye. The thought created an unexpected hollowness in her chest. "I don't know how to thank you properly." Reed shifted uncomfortably under her gaze. "No thanks necessary, Miss Hartwell. I'm just glad you're safely back with your people." He replaced his hat and moved to mount Buck. "Wait," Willa said impulsively. "You've ridden all day to help me. At least stay for supper before you start back." Morrison nodded agreement. "She's right, Calloway. We'll be making camp by the Big Blue River. Good grazing for your horses, and the least we can do is offer you a hot meal and a place by our fire tonight." Reed hesitated, looking from Morrison to Willa. Something in her expression must have swayed him, because he finally nodded. "That's kind of you. Thank you." As the wagon train resumed its westward journey, Willa found herself seated in the Peterson wagon as Morrison had directed, but her thoughts remained with the quiet horseman who rode alongside the caravan. There was something about Reed Calloway that intrigued her, a depth beneath his reticent exterior that she had glimpsed during their brief time together. The afternoon passed slowly as the wagons lumbered across the prairie. Willa told her story several times to different members of the company, each retelling making her more aware of how fortunate she had been that Reed had found her. By the time they reached the Big Blue River and began setting up camp for the night, she had made a decision. As the women organized the evening meal and the men tended to the livestock, Willa sought out Reed, who was seeing to his horses at the edge of the camp. He looked up as she approached, a question in his eyes. "Miss Hartwell," he greeted her. "Is everything all right?" "Yes," she said, watching as he brushed Buck with long, careful strokes. "I wanted to ask you something." He waited, his hands never stopping their work. "The wagon train will be passing near Silver Creek in about a week, according to Mr. Morrison," Willa began. "I was wondering if... that is, would it be possible for me to visit your ranch? To properly thank you for your help." Reed's hand stilled on the brush. "That's not necessary." "I know it isn't necessary," Willa said, frustrated by his persistent humility. "But I would like to see your horses. You spoke of them with such pride." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "They are worth seeing." "Then may I?" Reed studied her for a long moment, as if trying to decipher her motives. "If Morrison agrees to a short detour, you're welcome at Silver Creek Ranch." Willa smiled, pleased with this small victory. "Thank you." They were interrupted by Mrs. Morrison calling everyone to supper. The meal was simple but hearty: beans, salt pork, and cornbread, with coffee to wash it down. Reed sat somewhat apart from the main group, clearly uncomfortable with the attention his rescue of Willa had garnered. Several of the men engaged him in conversation about his ranch and the conditions ahead on the trail, which he answered politely but briefly. After the meal, as darkness settled over the camp and families retired to their wagons, Willa found herself sitting beside Reed at the main fire. Morrison had offered him a place in one of the wagons for the night, but Reed had declined, saying he preferred to sleep under the stars. "You're not comfortable around crowds, are you?" Willa observed, keeping her voice low so others wouldn't hear. Reed poked at the fire with a stick. "I've spent most of my adult life in wide open spaces with more horses than people for company. Takes some adjusting when I find myself in a gathering this size. Even I find it overwhelming sometimes," Willa admitted. 28 wagons, nearly 100 people. There's never a moment of true solitude." Reed glanced at her. "You don't strike me as someone who craves solitude." "Maybe not. But I do value privacy. The chance to hear my own thoughts." She looked up at the star-filled sky. "Moments like this, when most have gone to bed, are precious." They sat in companionable silence for a while, the crackling fire and distant sounds of the river filling the space between them. "What will you do?" Reed finally asked. "When you reach Oregon?" Willa considered the question. "My uncle has offered me a home and work in his store. It's not what I imagined for my life, but it's security." She sighed. "Without the wagon and our possessions, I have even fewer options now." "What did you imagine? Before, I mean." The question surprised her. It was more personal than anything he had asked previously. "I wanted to teach," she said softly. "I have some education, more than most women get. I thought perhaps I could start a small school somewhere. Help build something in a new community." Reed nodded thoughtfully. "The West needs teachers. Every settlement I've seen is full of children running wild while their parents work from dawn till dusk." "Including Silver Creek?" Willa asked, curious about his home. "Especially Silver Creek," Reed confirmed. "It's growing faster than anyone expected." The silver mines bring workers, the workers bring families, and suddenly there's a proper town where there was just a trading post 3 years ago. "No school?" "Not yet. There's talk of building one next spring." He gave her a considering look. "You might want to keep that in mind." The implication of his words hung between them, an alternative to the path that had been laid out for her. Willa felt a flutter of something like hope, quickly tempered by practicality. "My uncle is expecting me," she said. "And I have nothing to my name now except Penny and the clothes I'm wearing." "True enough," Reed acknowledged. "Just a thought." Mrs. Morrison approached them then, carrying a bundle. "Willa, dear, I've put together some things for you from what folks could spare. Nothing fancy, but enough to see you through to Oregon." Willa accepted the bundle with gratitude, touched by the generosity of her fellow travelers. Mrs. Morrison patted her shoulder before turning to Reed. "Mr. Calloway, we've prepared a bedroll for you by the supply wagon. Far enough from the snorers to get some rest." She smiled warmly. "We're all mighty grateful for what you did for our Willa." Reed thanked her politely, and the older woman left them with a knowing glance that made Willa flush slightly. "I should get some rest," she said, rising. "And let you do the same. You have a long ride home tomorrow." Reed stood as well, towering over her in the firelight. "Will I see you before I leave?" "I'll be heading out at first light." "I'll be up," Willa promised. "I want to say a proper goodbye." She left him then, making her way to the wagon she would share with 2 other single women. As she settled onto her borrowed blankets, Willa found herself thinking not of Oregon or her uncle's store, but of Silver Creek and its need for a teacher. It was a foolish thought, born of gratitude and perhaps a growing admiration for the quiet horseman who had come to her rescue. By morning, common sense would prevail. Yet when she rose before dawn and made her way to the edge of camp where Reed was preparing to depart, Willa found that the night's sleep had not diminished her interest in Silver Creek or in Reed Calloway himself. He was adjusting Buck's saddle when she approached, his pack-horse already loaded. The eastern sky was just beginning to lighten, painting the world in shades of gray and purple. "You're up early," Reed observed, though he didn't seem surprised to see her. "I promised I would be." Willa pulled her shawl tighter against the morning chill. "I wanted to thank you again, and wish you safe travels." Reed nodded, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that hadn't been there the previous evening. "I meant what I said about Silver Creek needing a teacher. If your plans change, there would be a place for you there." Willa's heart quickened at his words. "Are you asking me to consider it as a destination rather than Oregon?" "I'm suggesting you have options." He finished with Buck's saddle and turned to face her fully. "You strike me as a woman who knows her own mind, Miss Hartwell. I wouldn't presume to tell you where it should lead you. But you'd welcome me if it led me to Silver Creek?" A smile, the first genuine, unguarded smile she had seen from him, transformed his face. "I would indeed." Something shifted between them in that moment, a recognition of possibilities either had anticipated when they met in the darkness beside a lonely creek. Willa found herself stepping closer, drawn by a certainty she couldn't explain. Then I will consider it very carefully, she said. Reed reached out hesitantly, as if to touch her cheek, then thought better of it and let his hand fall. The offer stands, whatever you decide. He mounted Buck with his characteristic grace, gathering the reins and looking down at her one last time. 1 week, he said. If Morrison keeps to his schedule, you'll be passing within 5 miles of Silver Creek Ranch. Just follow the creek north from the main trail. 1 week, Willa repeated. Safe journey, Reed. He tipped his hat to her and turned his horse eastward, the rising sun at his back casting his shadow long across the prairie grass. Willa watched until he was a distant speck on the horizon, then returned to the awakening camp with thoughts of Silver Creek occupying her mind. The wagon train resumed its westward journey that morning, and Willa found herself riding Penny alongside rather than sitting in one of the wagons. The loss of her family's possessions weighed on her, but the freedom of making her own way gave her an unexpected sense of possibility. Throughout the day, she found herself thinking of Reed Calloway's quiet strength and the life he had carved out for himself in this wild country. That evening, she sought out Thomas Morrison as he checked the wagons before nightfall. Mr. Morrison, she began, I wanted to ask about our route through Colorado. Morrison looked up from the wheel he was examining. Following the main trail all the way to South Pass, same as planned. Why do you ask? Reed Calloway mentioned that we'll be passing near Silver Creek next week. I was wondering if it might be possible to visit there before continuing on. The wagon master straightened, giving her a shrewd look. This have anything to do with Calloway himself? Willa felt her cheeks warm. He mentioned they're in need of a teacher. I was trained for teaching before my parents died. Morrison stroked his beard thoughtfully. Silver Creek's growing fast. Good people, from what I hear. He studied her face. Your uncle's expecting you in Oregon. I know, Willa acknowledged. And I'm grateful for his offer. But perhaps I could make my own way. Start something of my own. Morrison's weathered face softened. Your father was a good man, Willa. Believed in letting people choose their own path. He nodded slowly. We can stop at Silver Creek. Give you a chance to see the place before you decide. Thank you, Willa said, relief and excitement mingling in her voice. Just be sure you know what you're doing, Morrison cautioned. The West isn't kind to those who make decisions based on fleeting feelings. Willa understood his meaning clearly. My interest in Silver Creek is about finding my place in the world, Mr. Morrison. Nothing more. Even as she said the words, though, Willa knew they weren't entirely true. Her interest in Silver Creek was inextricably linked to its taciturn rancher with the kind eyes and gentle hands. Whether that interest was wise remained to be seen. The days that followed passed with agonizing slowness for Willa. The wagon train made steady progress across the Colorado Territory, the landscape growing more dramatic as they approached the foothills of the Rocky Mountains. She threw herself into helping wherever she was needed, cooking, mending, teaching the children during the midday rest, all while her thoughts frequently drifted to Silver Creek and what awaited her there. On the 6th day after Reed's departure, Morrison announced that they would reach the Silver Creek Trail by the following afternoon. That evening, Willa found herself unable to sleep, her mind racing with questions and possibilities. Would Reed be pleased to see her? Was she making a terrible mistake, considering a change in her carefully laid plans based on such a brief acquaintance? When morning came, she dressed with particular care in the best of her borrowed clothes, a blue calico dress that Mrs. Morrison had altered to fit her slender frame. She brushed her dark hair until it shone, securing it at the nape of her neck with a ribbon salvaged from her old belongings. You look nice, observed Sarah Peterson, the young woman who had shared her wagon space for the past week. Special occasion? Just visiting friends, Willa replied, not wanting to explain the complicated truth. They reached the Silver Creek Trail by mid-afternoon, just as Morrison had predicted. The wagon master called a halt, gathering the company to explain the brief detour. We'll be stopping at Silver Creek Settlement for one night, he announced. Good opportunity to replenish supplies and give the animals a proper rest before the mountain crossing. We'll head out on the main trail again at dawn the day after tomorrow. There were no objections. The prospect of a night in a proper settlement, however small, was welcome after weeks on the trail. As the wagons turned north toward Silver Creek, Willa felt her nerves increasing with every mile. What if Reed had only been being polite? What if Silver Creek turned out to be nothing like she imagined? The settlement came into view as they crested a gentle rise, a collection of wooden buildings nestled in a valley where a clear creek tumbled down from the mountains. It was larger than Willa had expected, with perhaps 30 structures arranged along a main street, smoke rising from chimneys, and the movement of people and horses visible even from a distance. Morrison directed the wagon train to a meadow at the edge of town where they could camp. As they set up for the night, several townspeople came out to greet them, offering fresh vegetables, milk, and news of the trail ahead. Willa listened distractedly, her eyes scanning each new face for Reed. "Looking for someone?" Mrs. Morrison asked knowingly. "I was wondering if Mr. Calloway might be in town," Willa admitted. "His ranch is a few miles north of here, according to that gentleman." Mrs. Morrison nodded toward a shopkeeper who was trading with some of the travelers. "Said he doesn't come into town much except for supplies or church on Sundays." Disappointment settled in Willa's chest. "I see. Why don't you ask about him?" Mrs. Morrison suggested. "These folks all seem to know him." Gathering her courage, Willa approached the shopkeeper, a friendly man in his 50s who introduced himself as Harold Jenkins. "Mr. Jenkins, I was wondering if you could tell me about Reed Calloway's ranch? I'm considering staying in the area, and he mentioned he might have work available." Jenkins's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Work at Silver Creek Ranch? That's unexpected. Reed keeps to himself mostly, runs the place with just his foreman and a couple of hands." He studied her curiously. "You know Calloway?" "We met recently," Willa said, keeping her explanation vague. "He mentioned the settlement needed a teacher." Understanding dawned on Jenkins's face. "Ah, a teacher. That we certainly do need. Got nearly 20 children here now, with more coming every month. Town council's been discussing building a schoolhouse, but we need someone to teach in it first." Willa's spirits lifted. "So there would be a position?" "Without doubt," Jenkins confirmed. "Pay wouldn't be much to start, but we could provide housing. Nothing fancy, probably a room above the store until the school's built." He looked at her with renewed interest. "You qualified, Miss Hartwell?" "Willa Hartwell. And yes, I completed teacher's training in St. Louis before heading west." Jenkins beamed. "Well now, that's Providence at work. Our last teacher, if you could call her that, was just a minister's wife doing her best with no real training." He gestured toward the town. "Would you like to see the site where the school will be built? I'm on the town council. I could introduce you to some of the parents." The offer was tempting, but Willa's thoughts were still with Reed. "Actually, I was hoping to visit Silver Creek Ranch first." "Is it far?" "About 3 miles up that road," Jenkins said, pointing to a track that led northward from the town. "Easy ride, but it'll be getting dark soon." "Perhaps tomorrow would be better." Willa hesitated. Tomorrow the wagon train would be preparing to leave. If she wanted to see Reed before making her decision, it would have to be today. "I think I'll ride up there now," she decided. "If I leave right away, I can make it there and back before full dark." Jenkins looked concerned. "It's not unsafe, but still, a young woman riding alone." "I'll be fine," Willa assured him, thinking of her midnight flight across the prairie just a week earlier. "My horse is fast, and I'm familiar with the area." The latter wasn't strictly true, but her determination outweighed her caution. After getting more specific directions from Jenkins, Willa returned to the wagon train to saddle Penny. Mrs. Morrison tried to dissuade her from going alone so late in the day, but Willa was resolute. "I'll be back before you need to worry," she promised. "I just need to see the ranch before I decide whether to stay." With Penny saddled and ready, Willa set off up the northern track, her heart beating a rapid rhythm that matched her horse's hoofbeats. The road was clear and well-traveled, winding through rolling grasslands dotted with stands of pine and aspen. As she rode, Willa tried to imagine what Reed's ranch might look like, and how he might receive her unexpected visit. After about half an hour, the road crested a hill, and Silver Creek Ranch spread out before her. A substantial log house stood on a rise overlooking a collection of barns, corrals, and outbuildings. Several large pastures stretched to the west, where horses grazed in the late afternoon sun. A creek, presumably Silver Creek itself, wound through the property, lined with cottonwoods and willows. It was beautiful, more established and prosperous than Willa had imagined. As she approached, she could see activity around the main barn, men moving about with the purposeful rhythm of end-of-day chores. She was halfway down the hill when one of the figures looked up, shading his eyes against the setting sun. Even at a distance, she recognized Reed's tall form and the way he stood straight-backed but relaxed, at home in his surroundings. He didn't move for a long moment, then suddenly he was striding toward the house, emerging moments later on horseback, riding up to meet her. They met where the road leveled out, Reed pulling Buck to a halt a few feet from her. His expression was a mixture of surprise and something else, pleasure, perhaps, or concern. "Willa," he said, her name soft on his lips. "I didn't expect you so soon. The wagon train is camped in Silver Creek tonight," she explained. "I wanted to see your ranch before." She trailed off, suddenly uncertain. "Before you decide whether to stay or continue on," Reed finished for her. He gestured toward the ranch buildings. "Well, this is it. Not as grand as some, but it suits me." "It's lovely," Willa said honestly. "Mr. Jenkins in town told me you rarely have visitors." A smile ghosted across Reed's face. "Jenkins talks too much." He shifted in his saddle. "Would you like to see it properly? There's still an hour of daylight left." "I would like that very much." Reed led her down to the ranch, where two men were finishing up the evening chores. He introduced them as Miguel, his foreman, and Caleb, a young ranch hand. Both men tipped their hats respectfully to Willa, curiosity evident in their glances. "Miss Hartwell is considering taking the teaching position in town," Reed explained, which seemed to satisfy their curiosity. He showed her the main barn first, where his prized horses were stabled. Willa was impressed by the quality of the animals and the immaculate condition of the facilities. "You've built something remarkable here," she observed as they walked through the stables. "It's taken time," Reed acknowledged. "And it's still growing. I'm breeding horses suited specifically for this country, strong, sure-footed, with good stamina for the mountains." His pride in his work was evident, and Willa found herself drawn to his passion for creating something of lasting value. As the tour continued to the other buildings and corrals, she asked questions about his methods and plans for the ranch's future. Reed answered thoughtfully, clearly pleased by her genuine interest. Finally, as the sun began to set, he led her to the main house. It was larger up close than it had appeared from the road, a substantial two-story structure built of massive pine logs with a wide porch wrapping around three sides. "This is more grand than I expected," Willa admitted as they climbed the porch steps. "Built with expansion in mind," Reed said. "I had notions of family when I designed it." A flush colored his tanned cheeks. "Though that hasn't materialized yet." The interior was simply but comfortably furnished, with a large stone fireplace dominating the main room. Windows on all sides let in the golden evening light, illuminating polished wooden floors and handcrafted furniture. "It's beautiful," Willa said, turning slowly to take it all in. "It needs a woman's touch," Reed observed, watching her. "I've done my best, but—" He gestured vaguely at the sparse decorations. Willa could see what he meant. The house was clean and well maintained, but it lacked the small touches that would make it truly a home. Still, the bones of the place were solid and welcoming. "Would you like some coffee?" Reed offered. "Or I could make tea." "I keep some for special occasions." "Tea would be lovely." Willa said, touched by his consideration. While Reed busied himself with the kettle and stove, Willa wandered to the windows, looking out at the ranch as dusk settled over the land. From this vantage point, she could see all the way to Silver Creek settlement in the distance, its windows beginning to glow with lamplight. You can see why I chose this spot, Reed said, joining her at the window. Best view in the county. I can see why you love it, Willa agreed. It feels peaceful. Most days, Reed said with a smile. Though ranching has its share of excitement too. Calving season, breaking new horses, the occasional mountain lion deciding my livestock looks tasty. The kettle whistled, and Reed returned to the stove. When he brought the tea served in surprisingly delicate china cups that seemed at odds with the rustic surroundings, they sat at the kitchen table, facing each other across its scarred wooden surface. Jenkins says the town needs a teacher badly, Willa said after her first sip. He mentioned they're planning to build a school. Reed nodded. They've been talking about it for months. Even set aside land for it. He studied her over his cup. Is that something you're truly interested in? I am, Willa said firmly. Teaching is what I've always wanted to do. The opportunity in Oregon was working in my uncle's store, not teaching. And what does your uncle think of you considering Silver Creek instead? Willa looked down at her tea. He doesn't know yet. I'll write to him if I decide to stay. Reed was quiet for a moment. I don't want to be the reason you change your plans, Willa. His use of her first name sent a small thrill through her. Silver Creek is a good place with good people, but it's still rough around the edges. Life here isn't easy. Life isn't easy anywhere, Willa pointed out. At least here, I'd be doing work that matters to me. And your wagon train? They leave tomorrow? The day after. Morrison agreed to the stop partly so I could see Silver Creek. She met Reed's gaze directly. And so I could see you again. The admission hung between them, honest and unadorned. Reed's expression softened, the reserve he typically maintained slipping just enough for Willa to glimpse the man beneath. I'm glad you came, he said simply. Outside, the last light was fading from the sky. Willa reluctantly set down her cup. I should head back before it's fully dark. Reed stood immediately. I'll ride with you. It's not safe to travel alone at night, even on this road. They rode back to Silver Creek settlement side by side, talking easily about the town, its people, and the possibilities it offered. The emerging stars provided enough light for them to see the road clearly, and the air was filled with the sounds of night creatures beginning their nocturnal chorus. If I stay, Willa said as they approached the lights of the settlement, would I see you often? You mentioned you don't come to town much. Reed was quiet for a moment before answering. I would make a point of coming more regularly. Perhaps Sunday services, at least. Just for religious devotion? Willa asked, a teasing note in her voice. Even in the darkness, she could sense his smile. Perhaps for other reasons as well. They reached the edge of town, where the wagon train's campfires glowed in the meadow. Reed reined in Buck, turning to face her. Willa, I want you to stay, he said, his voice low and earnest. But I want it to be because Silver Creek is right for you, not because of anything else. What if both are true? Willa asked softly. What if Silver Creek is right for me, and so are you? Reed's breath caught audibly. That would be more than I dared hope for when I found you by that creek a week ago. Impulsively, Willa reached across the space between them, placing her hand on his arm. I haven't known you long, Reed Calloway, but I feel as though I've been waiting to meet you my whole life. In the silvery moonlight, Reed's face showed a vulnerability she hadn't seen before. He covered her hand with his own, large and warm. I'll come tomorrow, he promised. We can talk more then, when you've had time to think. Willa nodded, reluctantly withdrawing her hand. Until tomorrow, then. She rode the remaining distance to the wagon train camp, aware of Reed watching until she safely reached the circle of wagons. When she looked back, he was still there, a solitary figure silhouetted against the night sky. Mrs. Morrison was waiting for her, relief evident on her face. I was beginning to worry, she scolded gently. Did you find what you were looking for? Willa smiled, dismounting and leading Penny to the picket line. I believe I did. That night, as she lay in her borrowed bedroll looking up at the stars, Willa made her decision. Silver Creek would be her home, not a waypoint on a longer journey. Something about this place, and the quiet rancher who had saved her from a midnight thief, felt right in a way nothing had since her parents' death. Tomorrow, she would tell Morrison and make arrangements to stay behind when the wagon train continued west. Morning brought clear skies and a flurry of activity as the settlers explored Silver Creek, trading for fresh supplies and enjoying the novelty of a proper settlement after weeks on the trail. Willa sought out Thomas Morrison early, finding him checking the wagons as was his habit. I've decided to stay, she told him without preamble. Morrison looked up from the wheel he was greasing, studying her face. Figured as much when you came back last night. You had that settled look about you. He straightened, wiping his hands on a rag. You sure about this, Willa? Oregon's still waiting. I'm sure, she said firmly. There's a need for a teacher here, and I can make a difference. It feels right. The wagon master nodded slowly. Your father would say it's your choice to make. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small leather pouch. This is your share of the wagon train fund. Not much, but enough to get you started. Willa accepted the pouch, touched by his foresight. Thank you. For everything. You write to your uncle, Morrison instructed. He'll be worried. I will today. Morrison hesitated, then added gruffly. And this Calloway, he's a good man? A smile spread across Willa's face. Yes. One of the best I've met. Well then. Morrison cleared his throat. We'll be heading out at dawn tomorrow. Make sure you're settled before then. With Morrison's blessing, Willa sought out Harold Jenkins to discuss the teaching position more formally. The shopkeeper was delighted by her decision to stay and immediately called an impromptu meeting of the town council. By midday, Willa had been officially hired as Silver Creek's first schoolteacher, with a small salary and the promised room above Jenkins's store. It's not much, Jenkins apologized, showing her the simple space with its narrow bed, dresser, and small table. But it's clean and private. It's perfect, Willa assured him, already envisioning how she would make it her own. She spent the afternoon writing to her uncle, explaining her change in plans and promising to visit Oregon when she was more established. As she sealed the letter, a commotion outside drew her to the window. Reed had arrived in town, looking more formal than she had seen him before, in a clean shirt and vest, his hair neatly combed under his hat. Willa's heart quickened as she watched him tie Buck to the hitching post outside Jenkins's store. She smoothed her borrowed dress and checked her hair in the small mirror before heading downstairs. Reed was speaking with Jenkins when she entered the store, both men turning at her approach. The shopkeeper excused himself with a knowing smile, leaving them alone among the barrels and shelves of goods. Mr. Jenkins tells me you've accepted the teaching position, Reed said, his eyes taking in her appearance with evident appreciation. I have, Willa confirmed. I'll be staying in the room upstairs until more permanent arrangements can be made. Reed nodded, seeming pleased but somewhat nervous. I thought perhaps you might like to see more of the town, now that you'll be living here. I would like that very much. They walked down Silver Creek's main street, Reed pointing out the various businesses and introducing her to people they encountered. The town was indeed growing rapidly, with new construction evident on several lots. The site for the school, currently just an empty piece of land near the church, held particular interest for Willa. Jenkins says they hope to have it built before winter, Reed explained as they stood looking at the plot. Until then, you'll be teaching in the church. That will work well enough, Willa said, already planning how she would arrange the space. How many children did you say there are? About 20 of school age, with more younger ones coming up. Reed hesitated. Including my foreman Miguel's 3 children. He's hoping they'll learn to read English. Their mother teaches them Spanish at home. The mention of families led to a natural question. What about your family, Reed? You mentioned you built your house with expansion in mind. A flush crept up his neck. I always hoped to have a family someday. Just hasn't happened yet. They continued their tour, ending at the small restaurant that served the town. Reed escorted her inside for a late lunch, where the proprietor, Mrs. Hollister, made a fuss over them both. So you're our new teacher, the plump woman exclaimed, setting plates of stew before them. And already friends with our Mr. Calloway. Isn't that nice? Her knowing wink made Willa blush. After they had eaten, Reed suggested they walk by the creek that gave the town its name. Away from curious eyes, they found a measure of privacy beneath the shade of cottonwood trees. The wagon train leaves tomorrow, Reed said as they walked slowly along the bank. Yes. I've made all the arrangements to stay behind. Reed stopped, turning to face her. Willa, I want to be clear about something. I'm very glad you're staying in Silver Creek, but I don't want you to feel any obligation toward me. Willa tilted her head, studying his earnest expression. What do you mean? I mean that your decision to stay should be about what's right for you. If, after you've been here a while, you decide Silver Creek isn't where you belong or that I'm not who you thought, you should feel free to change your mind. His consideration touched her deeply. Reed Calloway, are you trying to warn me away from you? A rueful smile crossed his face. No. Quite the opposite. I'm trying to be honorable, which is considerably more difficult than I expected when you're involved. Willa stepped closer to him, close enough to see the flecks of gray in his blue eyes. I'm staying in Silver Creek because I believe I can build a life here that means something. The fact that you're part of that life is... She searched for the right word. A blessing I didn't expect. Reed's expression softened, his usual reserve giving way to open affection. Slowly, giving her every chance to step away, he raised his hand to cup her cheek. His touch was gentle, almost reverent. May I? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Willa nodded, her heart racing as Reed lowered his head to hers. Their first kiss was soft and tentative, a question rather than a declaration. When they parted, Reed's eyes searched hers, looking for any sign of doubt or regret. That was worth waiting for, Willa said softly, smiling up at him. Reed's answering smile was radiant. I've been thinking about doing that since I found you by that creek. Only thinking about it? Willa teased. I'm a patient man. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Some things are worth taking time over. They walked back to town hand in hand, both aware of the curious glances they received but too content to care. When they reached Jenkins's store, Reed released her hand reluctantly. I should get back to the ranch, he said. But I'll come for you tomorrow morning, after the wagon train leaves. Perhaps you'd like to see more of the area around Silver Creek? I'd like that, Willa agreed. And perhaps I could see your ranch again as well. Reed's eyes warmed at the suggestion. Any time you wish. That evening, Willa joined the wagon train for a final meal together. The travelers were in high spirits, excited to be continuing their journey after the brief respite in Silver Creek. Several expressed surprise at her decision to stay behind, but most seemed to understand when she explained the teaching opportunity. Mrs. Morrison hugged her tightly when they said their goodbyes. You write to me when you get settled, she insisted. I want to hear all about your school and that handsome rancher of yours. He's not mine, Willa protested weakly. Mrs. Morrison gave her a knowing look. Not yet, perhaps. But I've seen the way he looks at you. The next morning, Willa stood at the edge of town, watching as the wagon train pulled out, continuing its westward journey. There was a moment of uncertainty as the last wagon disappeared around a bend in the trail, a realization that she had just closed one door in her life and opened another, with no guarantees of what lay ahead. That uncertainty faded when she turned and saw Reed riding toward her, his face lighting up at the sight of her waiting. This new chapter might hold its own challenges, but she wouldn't face them alone. Over the following weeks, Willa threw herself into establishing Silver Creek's first real school. The church provided a serviceable classroom, and the children, though initially wary of this new teacher with her Eastern ways, quickly warmed to her enthusiasm and genuine interest in their progress. Parents expressed gratitude for her efforts, and the town council moved forward with plans for the schoolhouse, now with Willa's input on its design. Her friendship with Reed deepened as summer gave way to fall. He came to town regularly, usually on the pretext of business, but always finding time to visit the school or take Willa for rides in the surrounding countryside. On Sundays he attended church services, something Jenkins claimed was a new development, and often invited Willa to Sunday dinner at the ranch afterward. These visits to Silver Creek Ranch became the highlight of Willa's week. She grew fond of Miguel and his family, who lived in a small house on the property, and of young Caleb, whose awkward admiration for Miguel's eldest daughter provided gentle amusement. The ranch itself began to feel like a second home, its peaceful beauty a welcome contrast to the bustling energy of the growing settlement. As for Reed, he revealed himself slowly, his natural reserve giving way by degrees to show the thoughtful, principled man beneath. He spoke of his dreams for the ranch, his hopes of breeding horses that would be known throughout the West for their quality and temperament. He shared stories of his years on the frontier, some amusing, others harrowing, and listened with genuine interest to Willa's tales of her life before coming west. Their courtship progressed with a deliberate pace that suited them both. Reed was unfailingly respectful, never pressing for more than Willa was ready to give, while making his growing feelings clear through his actions rather than flowery words. By October, the aspens had turned golden on the mountainsides, and work on the schoolhouse was progressing well. Willa had settled into her life in Silver Creek, finding satisfaction in her teaching and joy in her developing relationship with Reed. When he invited her to a harvest dance being held in the newly completed church hall, she accepted eagerly, looking forward to a proper social event with the man who had become so important to her. The night of the dance arrived crisp and clear, with stars scattered across the sky like diamond dust. Reed called for her at Jenkins's store, looking unusually formal in a dark suit and polished boots, his typically unruly hair tamed for the occasion. "You look beautiful," he said when she appeared in a borrowed dress of deep blue, her hair arranged in an elegant knot at the nape of her neck. "And you look very handsome," she replied, accepting his arm as they walked to the church hall. The dance was a lively affair, with a three-piece band providing music and most of the town in attendance. Willa found herself welcomed warmly by families she had come to know through her teaching, and introduced to others she hadn't yet met. Throughout the evening, Reed remained attentive, never straying far from her side. When the band struck up a waltz, Reed led her onto the floor with surprising grace for a man who spent most of his days on horseback. "You dance well," Willa observed as they moved among the other couples. "My mother insisted I learn," Reed explained. "Said no son of hers would grow up to be a clumsy oaf at social gatherings." A smile touched his lips at the memory. "It's one of the few clear recollections I have of her. She would be proud of the man you've become," Willa said softly. Reed's arm tightened slightly around her waist. "I hope so." As the evening progressed, Willa noticed Reed becoming increasingly distracted, his gaze drifting to the door, as if expecting someone. When she asked if something was wrong, he reassured her that everything was fine, but there was a tension in his manner that hadn't been there earlier. The mystery was solved when Harold Jenkins approached them during a break in the dancing, a smile spreading across his face. "It's arrived, Calloway," he announced. "Just came in on the late stage. Martin's holding it at the office for you." Reed's expression cleared, relief and excitement replacing his earlier tension. "Thank you, Jenkins. I'll go collect it now." He turned to Willa. "Would you mind coming with me? It won't take long." Curious, Willa accompanied Reed to the small building that served as Silver Creek's post and telegraph office. Martin, the postmaster, was waiting for them with a small package wrapped in brown paper. "Special delivery from Denver," Martin said, handing the package to Reed. "Came with instructions to get it to you immediately." Reed thanked him, then led Willa outside, where the cool night air was refreshing after the warmth of the dance hall. Instead of opening the package immediately, he guided her to a small bench beside the creek, where the sound of water flowing over rocks provided a peaceful backdrop. "What is it?" Willa asked, intrigued by his mysterious behavior. Reed turned the package over in his hands, suddenly looking uncharacteristically nervous. "Something I've been waiting for." He met her eyes in the moonlight. "Something important." He carefully unwrapped the package, revealing a small velvet box. Willa's breath caught as she realized what it might contain. "I ordered this from Denver 3 weeks ago," Reed explained, his voice low and earnest. "I wanted to have it for tonight." He opened the box, revealing a delicate gold ring set with a small but perfect diamond that caught the moonlight and transformed it into rainbow fire. "Willa," Reed began, taking her hand in his. "I know we haven't known each other long by most standards. 4 months isn't much in the grand scheme of things." He smiled slightly. "But out here, we learn to recognize what matters quickly. Life doesn't always give us the luxury of time." He took a deep breath, his eyes never leaving hers. "From the moment I found you that night, something in me knew you were special. Getting to know you these past months has only confirmed what my heart understood immediately. You're the woman I'd been waiting for all my life, though I didn't know it until you appeared." Reed slid from the bench to one knee before her, still holding her hand. "Willa Hartwell, I love you. Will you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Tears blurred Willa's vision as emotion welled up inside her. In this man, this quiet, honorable rancher who had rescued her on a moonlit night, she had found everything she hadn't known she was looking for. "Yes," she whispered, then more strongly. "Yes, Reed. I love you, and I would be honored to be your wife." Joy transformed Reed's face as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her alone. He rose and drew her to her feet, gathering her into his arms for a kiss that held all the promise of their future together. When they finally parted, both breathless and smiling, Reed rested his forehead against hers. "You've made me the happiest man in Colorado," he murmured. "And I'm the happiest woman," Willa replied, her heart so full it seemed impossible to contain her joy. They returned to the dance hand in hand, their news spreading quickly through the gathering. There were congratulations and well wishes from all sides, with Mrs. Hollister declaring that she had known all along that they were meant for each other. As the evening drew to a close, Reed escorted Willa back to her room above Jenkins's store. Standing in the moonlight outside the building, he kissed her once more, lingering and tender. "When?" he asked simply. Willa knew what he was asking. "After the schoolhouse is finished," she decided. "Perhaps December, before the heavy snows come." Reed nodded, pleased with her answer. "Not too long, then." "Not too long," she agreed. "Though we have a lifetime ahead of us." The weeks that followed were filled with preparations for the wedding, for the completion of the schoolhouse, and for Willa's eventual move to Silver Creek Ranch. The townspeople embraced the upcoming nuptials with enthusiasm, offering help and gifts with a generosity that touched Willa deeply. She had found not just a home in Silver Creek, but a community that had taken her to its heart. Reed was a constant presence, dividing his time between ranch work and assisting with the schoolhouse construction. He added his own touches to the building, bookshelves built with his own hands, a bell tower that was not in the original plans, window boxes for spring flowers. Each addition reflected his support for Willa's calling and his desire to make her work environment as perfect as he could. At the ranch, changes were underway as well. The master bedroom, which Reed had never fully furnished, was transformed with a new bed, curtains from Denver, and a dressing table that he built himself. He consulted Willa on every decision, wanting the house to feel as much hers as his from the moment she arrived. November brought the first snow and the completion of the schoolhouse. Willa's students helped her move her books and teaching materials from the church to the new building, their excitement at having a real school, mirroring her own satisfaction at seeing her dreams take physical form. On the day before Thanksgiving, The town held a formal dedication ceremony for the schoolhouse. Morrison, who had helped broker a donation of books from Denver merchants, gave a speech about the importance of education on the frontier. As Willa stood beside him, looking out at the gathered townspeople and her beaming fiancé in the front row, she felt a profound sense of belonging. "This community has embraced me as one of its own," she said when it was her turn to speak. "4 months ago, I arrived here by chance, a detour on what I thought was my destined path. Now I know that Silver Creek was my true destination all along." Her gaze found Reed's, and the love shining in his eyes gave her the courage to continue. "Tomorrow we celebrate Thanksgiving. I have more to be thankful for than I can express. This beautiful school, the trust you've placed in me to teach your children, and most of all, the love I found here." She smiled through tears of joy. "Silver Creek has given me not just a place to teach, but a place to call home, and a future brighter than I ever dared dream." The applause that followed was warm and heartfelt. Reed made his way to her side as the crowd dispersed, taking her hand in his. "That was beautiful," he said softly. "And very true. Silver Creek is better for having you in it." "I'm better for being here," Willa replied. "For finding you." The Thanksgiving feast the next day was held at Silver Creek Ranch, with Miguel's family, Jenkins, the Hollisters, and several other townspeople joining them. The long table in Reed's dining room, used for the first time since he had built it years before, was laden with food and surrounded by laughter. As Willa looked around at the faces of people who had become dear to her in such a short time, she felt a contentment that went bone deep. Later, as their guests departed and twilight settled over the ranch, Reed led Willa to the porch, where they could watch the last light fade from the snow-covered landscape. 3 more weeks, he said, his arm around her waist. "Then you'll be coming home to stay." Home. The word held such promise now. "I can hardly wait," Willa admitted. "Though I'm a bit nervous about the wedding itself. I've never liked being the center of attention." Reed chuckled. "We could elope. Just ride to the next county and find a judge. Mrs. Hollister would never forgive us," Willa said, laughing. "She's been planning the wedding supper for weeks." "True enough." Reed turned to face her, his expression growing more serious. "As long as we're together at the end of it, the details don't matter much to me." Willa reached up to touch his face, still amazed sometimes that this good man was hers. "That's all that matters to me, too." December arrived with a series of gentle snowfalls that transformed Silver Creek into a winter wonderland. The wedding was set for the 15th, to be held in the church, with the reception following in the new schoolhouse, the largest space available for such a gathering. As the day approached, Willa found herself increasingly caught up in the excitement of the town. Women she barely knew presented her with handmade gifts for her new home. The children in her school created a special book of drawings and good wishes. Even the stage drivers began bringing packages addressed to the future Mrs. Calloway, from merchants in Denver who had heard about the wedding from Morrison. The night before the ceremony, Willa sat in her room above Jenkins's store, looking at the simple white dress that Mrs. Morrison had sent from Oregon. It had arrived just in time, along with a heartfelt letter congratulating her on finding her true place in the world. A light tap at her door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find Mrs. Hollister standing there with a small package. "I know it's bad luck for the groom to see the bride before the wedding," the older woman said, "but Reed asked me to deliver this to you tonight." Curious, Willa invited her in and opened the package. Inside was a small wooden box, exquisitely carved with a pattern of wildflowers. When she lifted the lid, a soft melody began to play, a music box, the tune a gentle lullaby she recognized from her childhood. A note in Reed's strong handwriting accompanied the gift. "My dearest Willa, on the eve of our wedding, I find myself thinking of how differently our lives might have unfolded if I hadn't decided to take the northern trail that night, or if you hadn't had the courage to escape from Blackwood. So many small choices led us to each other, reminding me that sometimes the best things in life come from unexpected detours. This music box belonged to my mother. It is one of the few things I have of hers, saved by my uncle and given to me when I left his home. The melody always brought me comfort in lonely times. Now I pass it to you, hoping it will remind you that even when we're apart, my love for you remains constant. Until tomorrow, when I make you my wife and promise before God and our friends to cherish you all the days of my life, with all my love. Reed. Tears filled Willa's eyes as she read his words. Mrs. Hollister discreetly busied herself arranging the wedding dress, giving Willa a moment to compose herself. "He's a good man, that Reed Calloway," the older woman observed. "Never thought I'd see the day he'd find a woman worthy of him, but you proved me wrong, my dear." "I think it's I who found a man worthy of me," Willa replied, carefully placing the music box on her small table where she could hear its melody as she fell asleep. The wedding day dawned clear and cold, the sun turning the snow-covered landscape into a dazzling expanse of white. Willa was awake early, too excited to sleep despite having stayed up late listening to the music box and rereading Reed's note. Mrs. Hollister arrived with 2 other women to help her prepare, bringing hot water for washing, coffee, and sweet rolls still warm from the oven. They chattered happily as they helped Willa dress and arranged her hair in an elegant style topped with a small circlet of evergreen and white winter berries. "Something borrowed," Mrs. Hollister said, fastening a delicate pearl necklace around Willa's throat. "My mother wore this on her wedding day, and I on mine." "And something blue," added Mrs. Jenkins, presenting a blue silk handkerchief embroidered with Willa's new initials WC. When they were finished, Willa hardly recognized herself in the small mirror. The white dress, simple yet elegant, complemented her dark hair and brought a glow to her cheeks that owed as much to happiness as to Mrs. Hollister's carefully applied rouge. "Reed Calloway won't know what hit him," Mrs. Jenkins declared with satisfaction. The church was filled to capacity when Harold Jenkins escorted Willa down the aisle. She had asked him to give her away, a role he accepted with tears in his eyes and assurances that it would be the highest honor of his life. But Willa barely noticed the crowded pews or the festive decorations of evergreen boughs and red berries. Her attention was fixed on Reed, waiting for her at the altar. He stood tall and straight in a new black suit, his face solemn until he saw her, then his expression transformed into one of such wonder and love that Willa's heart seemed to skip several beats. The ceremony itself passed in a blur of emotion. Willa was aware of the minister's words, of Reed's strong hands holding hers, of the ring, a simple gold band that matched her engagement ring, being slipped onto her finger. But most of all, she remembered Reed's eyes, never leaving hers as they spoke their vows, and the gentle way he kissed her when they were pronounced husband and wife. The celebration afterward was everything a frontier wedding should be: boisterous, joyful, and filled with good food, music, and dancing. The schoolhouse had been transformed with evergreen garlands, red ribbons, and dozens of candles that cast a warm glow over the proceedings. Everyone in Silver Creek seemed to be there, along with ranchers and miners from the surrounding area, all eager to celebrate the union of their teacher and the respected rancher from Silver Creek Ranch. As the afternoon turned to evening, Reed found a quiet moment to draw Willa away from the festivities, leading her to a small anteroom where they could catch their breath. "Mrs. Calloway," he said, his voice caressing her new name. "Are you happy?" Willa looked up at her husband, with a heart so full it seemed impossible it wouldn't burst from joy. "Happier than I ever imagined I could be." Reed gathered her close, his kiss tender yet possessive. "I've been waiting all day to have you to myself," he murmured against her lips. "We have the rest of our lives to be alone together," Willa reminded him, though she made no move to leave his embrace. "Starting tonight," Reed agreed, a new warmth in his eyes that sent a thrill of anticipation through her. They rejoined the celebration for the final dances and the traditional seeing-off, where guests lined up to wish them well as they departed. Reed had arranged for a closed carriage, a rarity in Silver Creek, to take them to the ranch, protecting Willa from the cold night air. As they drove away from the schoolhouse, the sounds of celebration fading behind them, Reed drew Willa close against his side, wrapping a thick blanket around them both. "Welcome home, Mrs. Calloway," he said softly. The ranch house was aglow with light when they arrived, Miguel and his wife having prepared it for their return. A fire burned in the main fireplace, and the delicious scent of fresh bread and coffee filled the air. On the dining table, a small supper had been laid out, along with a bottle of champagne and other luxury rarely seen in Silver Creek. Reed helped Willa remove her coat, his movements unhurried yet charged with a new awareness between them. They shared the simple meal, talking quietly about the day and accepting the reality that they were now husband and wife. When they had finished, Reed rose and extended his hand to her. "Shall I show you to our room?" Willa placed her hand in his, trust and love outweighing the natural nervousness of a bride on her wedding night. "Yes." The master bedroom was transformed from when she had last seen it. Candles illuminated the space, casting a golden glow over the new bedcovers and curtains. A fire crackled in the small fireplace, taking the chill from the air. Most touching of all, Reed had placed her music box on the nightstand beside the bed, open and playing its gentle melody. "It's beautiful," Willa said, taking in all the careful preparations. "You're beautiful," Reed replied, his voice husky with emotion. He came to stand behind her, his hands gently resting on her shoulders. "I still can't quite believe you're here. That you're my wife." Willa turned to face him, her own wonder matching his. "I am. And you're my husband." She reached up to touch his face, tracing the strong line of his jaw. "My Reed." His name on her lips seemed to break something loose in him. Reed drew her into his arms, his kiss deeper and more urgent than before. Willa responded with equal fervor, all nervousness forgotten in the rightness of being in her husband's embrace. With gentle reverence, Reed helped her out of her wedding dress, his hands trembling slightly as he uncovered her beauty. Willa, in turn, helped him remove his formal clothes, her own fingers unsteady but determined. When at last they stood before each other unclothed, there was a moment of pure stillness of recognition and acceptance, and overwhelming love. "I will cherish you all the days of my life," Reed whispered, gathering her to him. "As I promised before God and our friends." "And I you," Willa replied, her heart so full it seemed to overflow. "All the days of my life." Their union that night was tender and passionate, a perfect expression of the love that had grown between them since that fateful midnight meeting beside a lonely creek. As they lay together afterward, wrapped in each other's arms with the moonlight streaming through the window, Willa knew with absolute certainty that she had found her true home. "What are you thinking?" Reed asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. Willa smiled against his chest. "I'm thinking how strange and wonderful life can be. For months ago, I was fleeing from my life in the middle of the night, with nothing but my horse and the clothes on my back. Now I'm here, with you, in this beautiful home that's ours." She raised her head to look at him. "I'm thinking that sometimes the worst moments of our lives can lead us to the best." Reed's eyes, soft in the moonlight, held all the love she could ever want. "In that case, I should probably thank Blackwood someday. If he hadn't stolen your wagon, you might never have met me." "Don't you dare thank that scoundrel," Willa said with mock severity. "But I am grateful for whatever twist of fate put you on that trail at just the right moment. As am I." Reed kissed her forehead gently. "Now sleep, Mrs. Calloway. Tomorrow is the first day of our life together." Willa nestled against him, content in a way she had never imagined possible. As she drifted toward sleep, she thought of the long journey that had brought her to this moment, not just the physical journey west, but the emotional path from loss and uncertainty to love and belonging. She had escaped a wagon thief at midnight, and a lone cowboy had led her horse and found a partner for life. It wasn't the ending she had anticipated when she set out from St. Louis, but it was far better than anything she could have planned for herself. Spring came early to Silver Creek that year. March brought warm winds that melted the snow in the valley, though the mountain peaks remained white against the blue sky. The schoolhouse was filled with restless children eager for summer, and the ranch was busy with new calves and the promise of foals from Reed's prized mares. Willa balanced her teaching duties with her role as Reed's wife and partner in the ranch, finding joy in both aspects of her life. The small house that had seemed so empty when she first visited now hummed with warmth and life. She had made it truly a home, adding touches that reflected both her taste and Reed's, creating a place where both could flourish. Their love had deepened through the winter months, growing from the initial attraction and affection into something richer and more enduring. They learned each other's habits and preferences, discovered shared interests, and respected differences. Reed's natural reserve gave way to open affection in the privacy of their home, while Willa found her confidence growing under his unwavering support. On a particularly beautiful April morning, Willa woke early to find Reed already gone from their bed, not unusual, as ranch work often required pre-dawn attention. She dressed and went downstairs, expecting to find him at the kitchen table with his coffee. Instead, she found a note propped against the coffee pot. "Come to the east pasture when you're ready. I have something to show you." Curious, Willa quickly ate breakfast and made her way to the indicated pasture, where the spring grass was already thick and green. Reed was standing beside the fence, watching as a mare and her new foal grazed peacefully nearby. "Good morning," she called as she approached. "What's this surprise?" Reed turned to her with a smile that still made her heart skip. "Good morning, Mrs. Calloway." He gestured toward the mare and foal. "Storm's daughter, born just before dawn. A perfect filly with excellent conformation." Willa joined him at the fence, admiring the wobbly-legged foal as it nursed from its mother. "She's beautiful. Have you named her yet?" "I thought you might like to do the honors," Reed said. "She's yours." Surprised, Willa looked up at him. "Mine?" Reed nodded, a hint of mischief in his eyes. "A anniversary gift, of sorts. 4 months ago today, a wagon thief brought us together. Seemed fitting to commemorate the occasion." Touched by his thoughtfulness, Willa leaned against him as she considered the filly. "Then I'll call her Providence," she decided. "Because that's what brought us together, Providence, not just a thief." "Providence," Reed repeated approvingly. "A fine name for a fine horse." He wrapped an arm around her waist, drawing her closer. "I have another gift for you as well, though it's not something I can show you just yet." Willa looked up at him curiously. "Another gift?" "Reed, you're spoiling me." His expression grew more serious, though his eyes remained warm. "This one is different. It's—" He hesitated, seeming uncharacteristically nervous. "It's a cradle. I've been working on it in the evenings, in the small workshop behind the barn." "A cradle?" Willa repeated, her heart suddenly racing. Reed nodded, watching her face carefully. "I thought we might need it. Perhaps sooner than I expected." Willa's hand went instinctively to her abdomen. She had suspected for a few weeks but hadn't been certain enough to share her thoughts with Reed. "How did you know?" A smile spread across his face, relief, joy, and wonder all mingled together. "I didn't, not for sure. But you've been tired lately, and a bit pale in the mornings. And last week, when Mrs. Hollister brought over that rich chocolate cake you love, you couldn't bear the smell of it." His hand covered hers where it rested on her stomach. "Are we truly expecting a child, Willa?" She nodded, tears of happiness filling her eyes. "I think so. Probably in late November." Reed drew her into a gentle embrace, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "A baby," he said softly. "Our baby. Are you pleased?" Willa asked, though his joy was evident. "Pleased doesn't begin to describe it." Reed kissed her tenderly. "I love you, Willa Calloway. More each day, if that's possible." "I love you too." She rested her head against his chest, listening to the strong, steady beat of his heart. "Who would have thought, when you found me that night, that we'd be standing here now, married and expecting a child?" Reed's laugh rumbled beneath her ear. "Not me. I was just hoping to get you safely back to your wagon train without getting shot by a thief. And I was just hoping to survive until morning," Willa added. "Life had much better plans for us both." They stood together by the fence, watching Providence explore her new world on spindly legs, while inside Willa, another new life was just beginning. The road ahead would hold challenges, as all roads do, but she knew with absolute certainty that whatever came, they would face it together. From midnight escape to morning promise, from strangers to lovers to family, their story had only just begun, but already it was more beautiful than either could have imagined. And in the years to come, they would often tell their children and grandchildren how it all started. She escaped a wagon thief at midnight, and a lone cowboy led her horse and found a partner for life.